Hello race fans, it is Jake Sanderson aka Snowman Cycling. Welcome back to the channel. We've got something a little bit different again for you today. We're going to be taking a look back at years gone by and we're going to have a look, we're going to roast my first ever Zwift racing win. And believe me when I say there is plenty to roast, as you can already tell on the screen, as I look for some reason like I am working in the world's hottest call center, taking your tech support call whilst contemplating my poor life choices. So let's jump straight into this one and we're going to have a look at the course. It's Watopia Seaside Sprint. We're doing 5 laps of it. It's the Race 3R Supercritical Race Series. And you already know this one's going to be a mess because I've turned the recording on halfway through the race. And I seem to be channeling the vibes of an out-of-luck Peloton instructor who's just found out that he's unexpectedly lost his job due to downsizing and his questionable taste in music. And this course doesn't have too many difficulties where you can try and thin the group or make it hard for people. There's this ramp right here where you go up it and then you go steeply down the other side and you go across the bridge where the sprint is. And you can see that my tactical skills still need quite a bit of refinement from where they are today, as I decide that I'm going to shred the group really hard here on the climb. But in fact, I end up just pacing them at a nice, comfortable pace. They must be wondering, who is this super pale domestique? Why is he here? And why is he pacing us? Well, luckily for this group, I'm exactly what they ordered. If they ordered a Wish.com Jesus, who looks like he hasn't been outside for well over a year. And as this group comes back together again on the other side of the descent, thanks to my extremely proficient pacing, we are left staring down the barrel of one more difficulty when we get to the volcano ramp. And then we're going to come back around and we're likely going to be hitting that rise and that sprint again as the finish at the end of the race. And it's a totally different proposition to it is these days when we're working out how we're going to try and win the race. What plan of attack? Are we going to go early? Are we going to go for the sprint? There's none of that today. I will be extremely pleased to get over the line first, any way, shape or form. And these are the days where I didn't have many weapons in my arsenal other than my patented poor man's sprint, where I do my best impression of Mark Cavendish's shorter, paler, angrier and hairier brother. But that means I'm going to have to be careful on these rises, like when we get to the volcano in a minute, to make sure if anybody attacks that they don't get away, because I can't win the race if I'm not at the front. We've been through this before. The question is, does Jake from 4 years ago know it or not, or is he going to do something stupid like we saw on the last climb? Well, as we get to that rise just outside the volcano, we don't have to wait too long to find out, as we can see that a couple of people on the front do start throwing down attacks. You knew it was coming. It had pretty much happened on every lap up until this point. I just didn't have it recorded. So I kind of knew this was coming, and the stronger riders, Russ, the Colonel, Cripps and T. Schrader, maybe possibly related to Hank Schrader from Breaking Bad, decide to push it on the front, and I realised that again, I'm going to have to go with them if I want to win this race, or at least have a chance of doing so. Unfortunately for me, I do again my poor man's domestique impression, as I just bridge up and bring the rest of the riders to the front of the race. So they must have been really loving this pale domestique, helping do the dirty work for them on the hard parts of the course. And just as I'm thinking that things are going to be okay, I'll get a little bit of recovery here. Another rider decides to start pushing it on the front and they get a little bit of a gap, so the rest of the riders come around. And I'd like to say here that I'd learned my lesson and that I did a bit better drafting and got the other riders to close the gap for me. But instead, I think I'm just pretty cooked and basically had to tag on at the end there. So not the most efficient use of energy. You can tell that we're definitely not as tidy as when we race these days. As I go through the lap banner, and of course, I don't even get a power up, I just get slapped in the face with nothing. So I was hoping we would get a power up, something useful, draft boost, aero boost, feather, anything to help us in the finale of the race, but no, clearly didn't sacrifice enough chickens to the Zwift algorithm gods this month, and so we're going to have to do it alone. We're going to have to do it solo. No teammates, no power-ups, just us and our watts, and do what we can to get that first ever Zwift win. And maybe that's why right now I look like I'm cycling with the weight of the world on my shoulders. It's either that or a look like I've just broken out of a rehab facility and stolen a bicycle to get away from there as fast as I possibly can. And in the meantime, I think it's only right that we take a closer look at some of these fashion and style choices that we've got going on. I'm not really sure what's going on with that haircut. It's not the best look. I prefer the top knot that I've got these days, although some of you might argue when I shaved it off for charity, that was the better look. But I don't think that's the real issue here. The real issue seems to be the combination of a lack of jersey alongside my tech support headset and a green screen with the corner cut off. So I'm not really sure what I was thinking there or why I thought those were good choices. So I'm giving that like a 3, 4 out of 10 absolute tops on a generous day. And on a related note, you don't really know what cringe is until you've had to go back and look at yourself from 4 years ago. And I'm sure you've all been in these situations yourselves where all of a sudden, before you know it, you've got 1.5k to go and this is it. We're at the end. I didn't think I'd be here, but suddenly I found myself in a position where I'm at the front of the race. There's only 1.3k to go and I've got a chance of being able to win this. Not necessarily something I was expecting to happen, but we're here now. I'm not going to get dropped before the finish, so I know that I'm going to be contesting for the podium or maybe even the win if I play my cards right here. And when I say cards, I mean card. I got one card, got one opportunity to try and win this, and that's going to be to sit in and give it everything with one big sprint. So I need to make sure, and I'm trying to gamble a little bit here, that these other riders don't let this guy on the front get away, get a little bit of a gap before we hit that climb, because if they've got a little bit of a gap and they push it hard up that climb, it's going to be really hard to get over them. So there's a huge element of luck involved here. I'm having to hope that these riders don't let anybody else get away. Nobody's going to launch it with a thermonuclear attack from here, which is what I do these days. So I come to the front of the group to make sure I'm not getting dropped. I naively think that if I put down a little bit of power here, it's going to maybe drop 1 or 2 people. And that is extremely naive. Nobody's getting dropped here. The riders come around me. I've wasted that energy and I'm left to think maybe I'm going to rue that and regret using that energy in about 10 to 15 seconds time. But as we roll over the crest of the hill and we start on the descent, we can see there's a couple of riders with a small gap and I'm not going to let that gap go. So even if it's me closing the gap here, I'm going to do it. And I think I'm in a great position here. I really, really do. But just as I'm about to launch it, I see my old enemy from before, Russ the Colonel Cripps, launches it way earlier. Much better place to launch that sprint than I did. And he comes flying past me and opens up a gap. And I have to launch it with everything I've got. Look at those watts. I'm really gritting my teeth. And I won't even be thwarted by my trainer coming off its stand there as I come around him at the end. I throw my T-Rex arms into the air in joy, do my best Casper the Angry Ghost impression as I celebrate my first ever win. I can't quite believe it, just 0.1 seconds as we managed to come around him just before we get to the finish line for the closest possible victory. And look how ecstatic I am with that win. So let's just have another look at that one, see exactly how close it was, the mistake I made. So whenever I do this sprint from now on, I always go where the Colonel went. It was the perfect place to go. Right there is where my trainer, you can see it came off its stand. So really lucky that I was able to keep putting down the power and just came around him as the Colonel gave me all that draft. The only reason I caught him is because he gave me all that draft. So thank you, Colonel. I really appreciate it for my first ever Zwift win. And he was nice enough to give me a message in the chat afterwards to say, nice win. You don't get gamesmanship like that on Zwift anymore these days. So hats off to you, Colonel. I'll take my flat cap back off to you too. Because I know for a fact I'd have been much more bitter about it than he was if some pale domestique could come around me at the very end to steal my win from under my nose. So there you have it, guys, my first ever Zwift win. I hope you enjoyed that deep dive back into the past. It was very traumatic for me having to look at all that cringe, but hopefully it was worth it. Huge thanks again to all my old and recent subscribers and viewers. Your support means everything to this channel. Without it, we wouldn't be here. Remember to like, comment and subscribe. Got Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee links below as well. You can support the channel that way. But remember, most importantly, race fast, ride hard, and that you are appreciated.